Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital Today channel. Lucas' unexpected move to the sinister, windswept stronghold of Wyndemere raises far more questions than it answers, especially as his behavior lately radiates the kind of quiet calculation that only a man with a secret mission could possess. And while Port Charles tries to brush off the discomfort of his relocation as nothing more than the next chapter in his complicated personal life, those paying close attention can sense that Lucas is operating under a heavy, deliberate purpose connected to the Cassadine estate's shadowy history and the unresolved mysteries tied to Nicholas' disappearances, Spencer's trauma, and every secret the island seems determined to swallow whole. Yet Lucas' arrival at Wyndemere becomes even more intriguing, and far more dangerous, when juxtaposed against Britt Westbourne's spiraling fear that she could be the next fatal casualty in the violent chess game orchestrated by the increasingly ruthless Jen Sidwell, whose lethal message to Port Charles became chillingly clear the moment Professor Henry Hank Dalton took his final breath as punishment for betraying the wrong man, sending Britt into a panic that revives every ounce of dread she thought she left behind in Croatia, every nightmare she hoped would fade when she stepped foot back into General Hospital and attempted to rebuild a life she never expected to get back. But instead of healing, Britt finds herself unraveling, haunted not only by Dalton's death but by the unsettling realization that her own proximity to Sidwell makes her an expendable pawn in his empire, especially now that Jason Morgan discovered the truth about her key fob being used in the lab break-in, an event Britt herself barely understands, and one that shattered the fragile trust she and Jason were beginning to rebuild after months of tension, grief, and mutual trauma. Britt can't even determine which part of her new reality hurts the most, the betrayal she believes Rocco Falconeri may have played a role in, the fact that she may have accidentally helped Dalton undermine Sidwell, or the terror that each passing hour increases the likelihood that Sidwell sees her as a liability who needs to be eliminated. And while Emma Scorpio Drake tries to reassure Britt that Rocco's affection, interest, and supposed loyalty were genuine, Britt can't stop replaying every conversation, every awkward silence, every moment that now seems tinged with manipulation or half-truths, leaving her unsure whether anyone in Port Charles truly wants her around at all. Her medication regimen, once her lifeline, now seems irrelevant. What good are doses, treatments, appointments, and routines if Sidwell decides to pull the trigger, literally or metaphorically? Britt feels like a woman trying to live in a city where the ground keeps shifting beneath her feet, and Port Charles itself seems to be pushing her away through whispers, cold shoulders, and the lingering stigma attached to her past transgressions, which would be easier to handle if she weren't also terrified of becoming Sidwell's next example. Meanwhile Jason, whose instincts have sharp edges honed by years of combat, violence, and loss, senses that Britt knows more than she's admitting, and his looming confrontation with her could become the catalyst that forces her into flight. He wants answers, he needs answers, and Britt isn't sure she can give him what he wants without putting a target on her back that Sidwell can't resist firing at. Jason's increasing suspicion of the Sidwell organization, his awareness that Dalton's death was a calculated warning, and his emerging desire to remove Sidwell from the map once and for all could put him and Britt on a collision course, Jason driven by justice or vengeance, Britt driven by desperation, and both navigating a landscape where even their deeply complicated bond might not be enough to save them from what comes next. Britt knows Jason might try to protect her if she stays, that he might chase her across the country if she runs, but she also knows Sidwell is always 10 steps ahead, always watching, always capable of slipping through the cracks in even the strongest defenses, and with Wyndemere now suddenly occupied by Lucas, who clearly has his own confidential agenda, Port Charles feels more volatile than ever, as though several storylines are about to intersect in a catastrophic chain reaction. Could Lucas' arrival at Wyndemere have something to do with Sidwell? With Dalton? With secrets buried on Spoon Island that connect to Britt more directly than she realizes? Or could Lucas be working undercover, investigating Sidwell's expanding reach in Port Charles under the guise of isolating himself at the Cassadine mansion, hoping to uncover the truth behind a network of crimes that may link the lab break-in, Dalton's death, and a handful of unexplained disappearances circulating quietly through the hospital's rumor mill? Every piece is connected, even if Britt can't see the picture yet, and Lucas may be holding puzzle fragments no one else knows exist. Yet even if Lucas' plan at Wyndemere turns out to be heroic, strategic, or shockingly Cassadine-centric, Britt's immediate concern is survival. She's haunted by the image of Dalton falling victim to Sidwell's brutality, the fear that his execution was only the first domino, and the awareness that Sidwell doesn't hesitate, doesn't negotiate, doesn't forgive, and the more Brit internalizes that truth, the more she becomes convinced she must disappear before Sidwell decides to clean house. She imagines slipping out of Port Charles quietly, maybe without even telling Jason, vanishing into a new identity and praying Sidwell never finds her, but fate rarely allows such clean escapes, especially not for Brit Westbourne. Her exit could take her anywhere, another country, another underground medical clinic, another shadow-filled city where she hides her past, but the most tantalizing possibility is that she stumbles into Brad Cooper, the one person whose friendship once grounded her, healed her, and reminded her of who she was beneath all the scheming, heartbreak, and fear. Brad is off the grid, unreachable, unseen, and yet narratively perfect as the person who could cross paths with Brit at just the right moment. Imagine Brit on the run, breathless, exhausted, paranoid, only to turn a corner and find Brad, who instantly recognizes the panic etched across her face and refuses to let her flee alone. Brad could be the anchor she needs, the voice that urges her home, not because Port Charles is safe but because running won't stop Sidwell, and because Brit deserves to reclaim her life, her dignity, her sense of belonging. With Brad's fiercely loyal heart and Brit's wounded resilience, they could decide to return together, arm in arm, prepared to face whatever awaits them. And Jason, who may already be planning to dismantle Sidwell's empire piece by piece, might see Brit's return as the final motivation he needs to strike directly at Sidwell, to eliminate the threat once and for all, to ensure no one else dies because of his reign. Port Charles is a city built on secrets, alliances, betrayals, and second chances, and right now every character in this storyline, Brit, Jason, Lucas, Brad, Rocco, Sidwell, and the ghosts left behind by Dalton, stands on the edge of a storm that could reshape everything. But one thing is clear, Lucas did not move to Wyndemere for peace, Brit cannot outrun Sidwell forever, and the collision of their stories may expose truths no one in Port Charles is ready to face. As the secrets surrounding Spoon Island grow heavier and the mystery of Lucas' relocation deepens, Port Charles finds itself drifting toward a convergence of danger that almost feels preordained, especially when even the simplest moments carry an undercurrent of tension, as though every hallway whisper at GH and every flicker of candlelight in Wyndemere foreshadows a revelation that will shake the foundation of the city, and while Brit Westbourne's growing fear pushes her toward the brink of running, Lucas' unnervingly calm presence at Wyndemere only intensifies the sense that something massive is in motion behind the scenes, something orchestrated with precision and purpose, something that binds both of their fates whether they know it or not, for Lucas' arrival wasn't spontaneous, nor was it the grieving escape some assume, it was intentional, calculated, and silently coordinated with pieces on the board no one realizes he's connected to. If Brit is fleeing Sidwell, Lucas might be confronting something equally perilous, a truth buried deep within the Cassadine archives, the kind of information powerful enough to upend legacies and expose betrayals that never died, only slept. Wyndemere has always been a labyrinth of secrets, hidden rooms, coded journals, unsent letters, encrypted digital maps abandoned by Cassadines who vanished into the night, and Lucas, armed with fragments of information left behind by a source in the WSB, believes that something inside the estate is linked to an underground medical network Sidwell may have corrupted, a network Dalton may have stumbled into before his death, a network Brit may unknowingly be entangled in. It is this chilling intersection between their worlds, Lucas' covert investigation and Brit's fear of being hunted, that sets the stage for an explosive sequence of events, even as each character tries to survive their own private storms. Brit, for her part, feels her sanity slipping every time she sees Jason's expression tighten while questioning her involvement in the lab break-in, because she knows he senses inconsistencies in her story, even if she's telling the truth exactly as she remembers it. But how do you defend yourself when the evidence lies? When your key fob unlocks a door you never touched? When your connection to Dalton becomes a liability you never intended? Brit is haunted by questions she can't answer, by memories that don't align, by the overwhelming fear that someone manipulated her digital footprint to frame her, or worse, to test her loyalty to Sidwell. And the more she thinks about Sidwell's cold approach to betrayal, the more she imagines Dalton's final moments echoing her own future if she stays in Port Charles too long. Yet even if she fled now, where would she go? Sidwell's reach stretches far beyond GH's sterile corridors and Port Charles's winding streets. He has connections in pharmaceutical networks, medical supply chains, offshore clinics, and discrete labs that exist 2 layers beneath legal oversight. Britt knows she can't outrun a man like that, not without a plan, not without an ally, and not without confronting the trauma she's been suppressing since Croatia. The emotional weight becomes so heavy that Britt starts to interpret every accidental bump in the GH hallway, every strange phone call, every shadow outside her apartment as signs that Sidwell's people are watching her. Paranoia becomes an unwanted companion, whispering that she is next, that Dalton's death was only the opening act. And yet, something unexpected happens in the midst of Britt's unraveling. She becomes aware of how isolated she truly is. Lies, half-truths, fear, and mistrust have driven away the few people who cared about her. Even her attempts to bond with Rocco now seem hopelessly tangled in the revelation that her key fob played a role in the plot against Dalton's lab, and though Emma insists Rocco's intentions were genuine, Britt feels too broken to believe in anything that looks like affection. Meanwhile, Jason, whose internal compass is forged by loyalty and loss, finds himself torn between pressuring Britt for answers and protecting her from becoming another casualty in Sidwell's escalating war. Jason recognizes a kind of desperation in Britt's eyes that reminds him of people who know they're being hunted, and while he initially focuses on interrogation, he soon realizes that there is something far more tangled beneath Britt's story, a complexity that points to a deeper conspiracy. If Sidwell framed Britt, or used her, then uncovering the truth will require Jason to follow a trail far more dangerous than he expected, one that leads directly toward Lucas and the secrets hidden within Wyndemere's stone walls. Jason doesn't yet know that Lucas has positioned himself at the heart of a looming threat, but Lucas does, and every night he spends alone in that cold mansion brings him closer to the truth buried beneath generations of power and manipulation. He pores over hidden files he finds locked in Nicholas' old study, reads corrupt financial ledgers detailing Cassadine partnerships with shadow organizations, decrypts messages that link the estate to illegal medical activity that predates even Helena herself. Lucas begins to piece together a horrifying possibility. Sidwell may not be an outsider infiltrating Port Charles, he might be continuing a legacy seeded by Cassadines, one that involves human experimentation, under-the-table pharmaceutical distribution, and underground treatments offered far from ethical oversight. The implications shake Lucas to the core. His medical oath becomes a weight he cannot set down, driving him deeper into the investigation even as he risks becoming another name on Sidwell's list of liabilities. And the more Lucas uncovers, the more he realizes that Britt is not merely an incidental figure in this plot, she is a crucial link. Her expertise, her past involvement in ethically gray medical research, her time overseas, and her accidental connection to Dalton paint her as someone Sidwell could easily exploit, monitor, and eliminate. Lucas begins to suspect that Britt's fear is justified, not exaggerated, and that he may be the only person in Port Charles quietly working on a plan that could save her, if he survives long enough to reveal what he's discovered. And yet Britt, unaware of Lucas' mission, falls deeper into panic, replaying Dalton's tragic fate until she convinces herself that disappearing is her only option. Her internal monologue becomes a battlefield, one side urging her to trust Jason, the other reminding her that Jason cannot protect her from someone like Sidwell forever. She remembers Croatia, how quickly danger materialized, how easily lives were lost, how fragile survival felt, and those memories serve as warnings etched in her bones. She starts planning her escape in secrecy, mapping routes out of Port Charles, identifying safe houses she used years ago, gathering resources, and preparing herself emotionally for the possibility that she may never return. But fate has other intentions, for Britt is about to cross paths with someone she never expected to see again. As she prepares to go on the run, she recalls Brad Cooper, her chaotic, loyal, messy, mischievous, and fiercely devoted best friend whose disappearance left a void she pretended not to feel but quietly mourned. She imagined seeing him again, how he'd instantly sense her fear, how he'd drop everything to help, how he'd reassure her with a mixture of sarcasm and sincerity that she deserves better than living in constant terror. She doesn't know where he is, but something in her heart whispers that she might find him out there, beyond Port Charles, beyond Sidwell's reach, beyond everything she's trying to escape. And maybe, just maybe, Brad could remind her who she really is. But what Britt doesn't know is that Brad's path may already be aligned with hers in ways she couldn't predict. Rumors hint he's entangled in something equally dangerous, something that could tie back to Lucas' investigation, something that positions Brad as a key figure in a mystery much larger than his disappearance. If Britt runs, she may run straight into the arms of someone who needs her just as desperately as she needs him. Meanwhile, Lucas' investigation escalates, drawing him closer to evidence so explosive it could connect Sidwell to crimes far beyond Dalton's death, including a network of falsified patient records, experimental drug shipments routed through offshore accounts, and a list of names tied to medical trials that were never sanctioned. One of those names could be Britt's. Another could be Brad's. And still another could be a Port Charles resident no one suspects. Lucas realizes he has no time to waste. He must expose Sidwell before Sidwell silences him. He must warn Britt before she walks into a trap. He must bring the truth to light before Wyndemere becomes his tomb. And as the storylines tighten around each other like threads in a noose, Port Charles approaches a reckoning that promises fallout across families, friendships, and alliances. Jason circles closer to Sidwell. Lucas inches nearer to a discovery that could destroy him. Britt teeters on the edge of disappearing forever. Brad's unknown crisis draws him toward a fated reunion. And Sidwell, always watching, always waiting, begins making moves that suggest he knows everything happening beneath the surface, including who's investigating him, who's preparing to run, and who needs to be eliminated before the truth breaks free. Port Charles is a city built on tension, rebellion, redemption, and secrets, but this time the secrets might be too big to bury, too dangerous to ignore, and too explosive to survive. And everything, Lucas' clandestine mission, Britt's instinct to flee, Brad's hidden troubles, Jason's suspicions, Rocco's entanglement, Dalton's death, and the shadows surrounding Sidwell, are about to collide in a storm from which none of them will escape unchanged. As the tension coiling around Port Charles tightens to a nearly suffocating degree, a strange shift in the city's rhythm begins to take hold, an unspoken awareness spreading through its residents that something dark is stirring beneath the surface, something far more orchestrated than coincidence. Even those who know nothing of Sidwell, Dalton, Britt, or Lucas feel it in subtle ways: hushed conversations in hospital stairwells, suspicious glances exchanged at the Metro Court bar, the sudden disappearance of certain files, the inexplicable shortage of specific medical supplies, and the unsettling feeling of being watched when no one appears to be there. Britt senses it most keenly, perhaps because fear has sharpened her instincts, or perhaps because Sidwell's reach has extended so quietly and efficiently through the systems she once trusted. Every beep of her phone, every anonymous email, every moment when her ID badge fails to scan properly sends her spiraling into deeper panic. But as Britt edges toward making her escape, Lucas reaches a turning point of his own. Sleepless nights spent combing through encrypted files in Wyndemere have led him to one undeniable conclusion: not only is Sidwell connected to the Cassadine network, he may be expanding it. Lucas uncovers hints of a dormant faction within the Cassadine organization, one that specialized in experimental biotechnologies and illicit medical trials, which Sidwell seems to be resurrecting with chilling precision. Some of the documents Lucas decrypts are copies of ancient Cassadine ledgers, referencing offshore medical hubs, shadow labs, and hidden facilities that were operational decades ago, facilities that modern databases never acknowledged. The more Lucas digs, the more he becomes convinced that Sidwell is trying to revive a global operation that collapsed after Helena's downfall, and Britt's involvement is no accident. Her medical expertise, her past dabbling in ethically gray research, her international connections, and even her time in Croatia make her the perfect candidate for recruitment or surveillance. Lucas realizes that Britt may have been targeted long before she realized it, and if Sidwell suspects she won't cooperate, she's absolutely in mortal danger. Lucas considers contacting Jason, but doing so risks exposing the investigation prematurely and putting both of them at risk. He contemplates leaving Wyndemere, but something in his gut warns him that the mansion, haunted by centuries of schemes, experiments, and secrets, still holds one final piece of the puzzle he hasn't found yet. Meanwhile, across town, Britt sits in her apartment with a half-packed bag at her feet, debating whether to bring the sentimental items that tie her to Port Charles or leave them behind forever. She stares at a photo of her and Brad from years ago and whispers a silent promise that she'll find him, no matter where the road leads. But just as she steels herself to walk away from her life, a message comes through her phone, a cryptic alert, anonymous and coded, containing only 3 words that freeze her blood and force her to reconsider everything: do not run. Whether it's a warning from an ally or a threat from Sidwell himself, Britt can't tell. But she knows one thing with absolute certainty: whatever storm is coming, she won't be able to outrun it. Not this time.